Good morning, America, and welcome to this morning's huddle, brought to you by Going on Offense. My name is Daryl Moon, and I'll be your host today. Thank you for being with us, and we hope you will join the conversation. We have a wonderful guest panelist with us today to talk about the therapy of cosmetology. We're holding these huddles every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in an effort to support those struggling, to brainstorm strategies to help, promote resources for emotional well-being, and to engage collaboration. Now to introduce today's guest. It's my pleasure to introduce to you my friend, Dakota Driscoll. I'm going to invite Dakota to take 4 or 5 minutes to introduce herself in just a minute and share maybe a thought about today's topic. But before I do, I want to invite all of you to participate in today's conversation. This is a conversation that everyone can jump into because we all get involved in this to some level or another. We'd love to include you. Please feel free to raise your hand on your control box and I'll turn on your mic and you can actually be a part of the conversation through audio. Or if you've got a question or a comment to share, please use the question box on your control panel to send those in. Dakota, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me okay now?
I can.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. It's always wonderful when these days begin with some lovely technical difficulties, but we made it through. So I'm Dakota Driscoll, and I just wanted to thank Daryl so much for having me on today. This is such an amazing opportunity, and I hope when everybody gets to know a little bit more about me and what I'm passionate about, everyone can understand why this is so special to me. This was really my goal with my education and my working background to really get the word out about this topic, and this is just so perfect, and to have someone like Daryl and this company recognize this is really amazing. So just a little bit about me and my background. I have a master's of public health. I actually just finished it last week, so that's very exciting.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. I specialized in social and behavioral health, and with that, I focused my research on workplace well-being and mental health, specifically in the workplace. And before that, and kind of at the same time, I was also a hairstylist. And that's really what pushed me into the public health sphere. Was I was working and on the job and just began to see some issues with health in general, but specifically mental health among stylists and people who work in the service industries and specifically the beauty industry. And I had joined some social media groups that talked about mental health in the salon, but it really wasn't anything that people were talking about candidly or to their management or really at an industry level. So my goal was to kind of broaden the focus of that and bring cosmetology into the academic world, specifically because there wasn't any research on mental health and workplace well-being for cosmetologists. So I just thought, what an amazing opportunity to really combine all of my passions and experience into this degree that I could then take that step to do my thesis research on this other population that not only have I been a part of, but am really, really passionate about giving back to. So yeah, that's just a
Fantastic.
very high level introduction of everything.
So to start off the conversation today, I have created some poll questions that I would love to get the audience to answer, and we'll kind of get a feel for where people are. And again, if you've got a particular question or comment, please use the control box, but let's get some feedback from the people that are on. So the first poll question that I'm going to launch is, do you have a preferred hair stylist or barber? So answer is yes, I rarely go to anyone else, or yes, I mostly go to the same one, or sort of, or no, not at all. So share your thoughts and we'll share the results with everybody. So take a minute we'll get some feedback here. We'll give people a few more seconds to figure out how to respond on the control box. And it looks like the majority online today are saying no. There's a few people who are saying, yes, I try to go to the same person. A few people that are saying, I rarely go to anybody else. We'll give people a few more seconds before we close the poll. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share it. So we have 20% who said, yes, I rarely go to anyone else. 20% who said, yes, I mostly go to the same one. And 60% that said no. So I'm going to hide that and launch another poll. If you have a preference, tell us why. So if you will, share with us whether mostly because of their skills or whether mostly because of the relationship you have with them or mostly because of convenience or other. And let's kind of see what the audience has to say. I have a few people coming in. Some are saying mostly because of convenience. See if anybody else has input. We'll leave it open for just another second. It looks like the group we have on today, everyone's saying mostly because of convenience.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and close that and share it. So 100% of the people on today said it's because of convenience.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and hide that. So let's start the conversation with just the relationship that builds. Now, you've been a hairstylist. Talk a little bit about your clients and the role you play in building a rapport with them and how that affects them returning to you from a business standpoint. And how is that relationship built? Talk a little bit about the relationship between a stylist and a client.
Sure. Okay, so from my personal experience, I think that that relationship really begins with a good first impression. I think that can make the biggest difference in a relationship between a stylist and his or her clients because you want to almost build that trust immediately. That moment that you come up to someone and introduce yourself, you really want them to know that they're going to be taken care of and respected and listened to. And that was something that I always got really good feedback from my clients about because I would approach them and with a handshake, today maybe we won't be able to do that quite so much anymore. But just opening yourself up like that and not approaching someone with that wall down already and having an attitude of like, this is something we're going to do together and I'm here for you for this next hour. And then from then on, over that next hour or even up to 3 to 4 hours, you spend directly with this person. You're not necessarily face to face, but you kind of are. You can really make eye contact and talk directly through the mirror. So you really get to know each other pretty quickly, and that personality can differ stylist to stylist. I always tried to read my clients and what they needed from the appointment. If they were very quiet, I didn't ever want to push them with uncomfortable small talk. I know that's something that people can talk about or complain about with experiences with their stylists sometimes if they're just too chatty or too open. So I think it really matters to listen to people and read the room, I guess. And then if they have that good experience with you that first time, then you have that relationship built to a certain point and they come to see you again and it just builds and builds and builds. And I always kept notes on people's personal lives a bit more even than their hair preferences because that would just keep the conversation going and it would build that connection between stylist and client and really make them feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Because even when I would get my own haircut from my coworkers, just sitting in that chair and having that hour to just relax and have someone take care of you can be really therapeutic. So I think providing that environment that's very comfortable for people is very important.
So we know that as we deal with challenges of life, having someone else to talk to is an incredibly powerful intervention.
Hmm.
I've been fascinated by the whole therapy of cosmetology for many, many years. I think I shared with you a few days ago that I read a book many years ago about the therapy of cosmetology and the fact that cosmetologists often play somewhat of a therapeutic role with their clients. Talk a little bit about your experiences where people would open up to you, build a relationship, and how you felt like perhaps you were able to help them deal with some of their challenges and struggles just because you built the rapport, not because you were a therapist or had any training, but just that friendship creates somewhat of an accountability partner and a help and a support.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are kind of two alleys that I would like to go down with my response to that. First of all, that it can be a really mutually beneficial relationship where, in my case, I was going back to school and I was constantly taking classes for most of the time when I was a hairstylist. So my clients were very aware of that and they were really interested to know what I was learning about, how it's going. So from their end, they were almost keeping me accountable because then I would be able to, feed back to them what I was learning. And then
Sure.
from their standpoint, um, say, oh man, I mean, I heard everything from, really amazing things that were happening in people's lives, them going back to school, dealing with, the struggles of having children, if maybe that's a struggle for you, or the excitement of getting married or graduating, or all of these really amazing, but at the same time, there could be some really negative things happening in people's lives that you hear about when they're in that environment that's comforting to them and they feel like they can open up. So, yeah, it's tough when you, as an empath like I am, and many stylists I know, you really take on all of other people's emotions. So that kind of leads me to the next answer to that question, is that it's really hard to draw that line between just being a service provider and being kind of that professional friend and being that person where you want to take on the responsibility of taking care of somebody and really following up and knowing that they're okay. So for example, another thing that really jump started my next step into my public health career was I had a client who was just in a really, really bad place. She had probably everything bad that you could possibly imagine happened to her within the span of about 6 months. And one day when she was in my chair, she was just really low that day and was expressing some suicide ideation to me. And I really didn't feel prepared to respond to that in any way that would be helpful to her, but also healthy for me.
Right.
Because with my personality as a very empathetic person, I immediately just wanted to like wrap her up in a big hug and be like, okay, let's go to lunch and let's hang out for the rest of the day. I want to make sure you're okay. And I just kept thinking about her all day. And later in the day, I even messaged her. I found her on social media and just said like, hey, are you okay? I want to make sure that like you're talking to somebody if you need to. And personally, I just felt really uncomfortable and very sad in that moment that someone felt so comfortable in my presence to talk to me about those things, but I didn't know how to help her.
Mm-hmm. Well, and any one of us, whether it's a family member or a friend or a coworker, can find ourselves in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And it is difficult. It's like, what do you do?
Hmm.
And I think getting the word out that it's okay to have that conversation with somebody, and
Hmm.
it's not going to push them over if you just open up and ask them questions like, do you have someone you can turn to?
Hmm.
Are you willing to turn to that person?
Yeah.
There's response phone numbers out there that people can call and get help.
Hmm.
Um, would you say that the relationship that a cosmetologist builds with somebody who's willing to open up about life issues um, is such that they can be a catalyst at engaging people and getting the help they need? And maybe what does that look like?
Yeah, I absolutely think that that relationship is a very unique one that could be leveraged for a lot of amazing things. But the caveat to that is that stylists need to be prepared to provide those things. So,
Mhm.
for example, with that client and that situation, I went home and I was Googling like suicide hotline, different resources that I could send to her, but I had never experienced that before. And I honestly just didn't know that that would ever come up. I didn't know that somebody would be that open and honest with me. So I
Mhm.
think from the very beginning, before any of this happens, if we could just be open and honest with stylists when they're training or when they're thinking about entering this career, that this will happen, be aware of it, but we're also going to prepare you to deal with that, not only to help these people in some way, not take on that responsibility for yourself, but also be able to deal with your own mental health as a stylist to be able to get through that. Um, but there have been some really amazing successes, say with barbershops. They have been used as health promotion tools for men's health, specifically with encouraging men to get colonoscopies or cancer screenings for different things. And other settings of hair salons have also been identified as settings for social support for women. So there are some really amazing opportunities there for community health opportunities, really connecting with people. But before anyone gets too excited about implementing these things in this setting, they really have to think about the stylist that would be responsible for giving that service so that you're not just
Mhm.
piling on all of these responsibilities onto somebody who has no idea how to navigate their own mental health and
Right.
their own stress that might come from that. Does that make sense?
It does. In fact, it reminds me, a couple of years ago, I was speaking at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It was an event that was talking specifically about health and wellness. And a gentleman did a presentation. It's a barber, and he had actually created a movement amongst the barbers around Washington, D.C. to encourage, and it was specifically African American barbershops where there was a real need to encourage people to get regular colonoscopies, health checks, visits. And it was amazing the success that they had had by using the barber shop and encouraging this network of barbers to really open up and have these conversations about go get screened, go see
Yeah,
your
and we're
doctor,
talking
check
about the
out
same
your
study.
numbers. And they were talking about the influence just around Washington, D.C. that this program had. And I sat back and went, that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about your comment about the emotional well-being of the stylist and the fact that that needs to be addressed too. It's not just it is preparing the stylist, but as a stylist,
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the emotional challenges and maybe even bring it into today. I mean,
Yeah.
for many stylists, their salons have been closed down. For many barbers, their shops have been closed down, and they're in the middle of now bringing that back up. And that's got to create some anxiety, not just for the patrons, but for the stylists as well. So talk a little
Yeah,
bit about that.
sure. So I think COVID has just changed everything at this point with this industry. And of course, it's going to be a huge hump to get over for a little bit. But I really do think that this is going to jumpstart a big change in the industry, but also the general attitude and knowledge of the industry and the realities of these stylists and the workers that do this job. And you've seen all of these pictures circulating around social media of people with signs that say I need a haircut, and it's just ridiculous because you getting a haircut is not an essential service. There's no reason for a hairstylist to be putting his or herself and their own family and their own health at risk for your hair.
Uh-huh.
So I think that there's going to be a huge shift in just general respect for the industry. And that is a factor, I would say, in the emotional well-being of stylists. So this is going to take it back to the research that I did as my thesis project for my master's degree. So with interviewing some stylists in the Kansas City and Lawrence, Kansas general area, I identified 10 major determinants of stress that came out of that. And they really range from management practices to that relationship that you have client to stylist, the financial challenges, the general disrespect and kind of attitude toward the industry of like, oh, you're just a hairstylist. There are huge expectations that come along with that too. At the same time of people thinking you're just a hairstylist, they also expect you to work magic in about an hour and change your entire life, which is just entirely unrealistic and not going to happen. So that experience was just so incredible to connect a lot of stylists in the area and help them realize that they're not alone and that this shift is happening, and it was happening kind of slowly. You could see some talk about it on social media of like, hey, maybe respect your stylist a little bit, talking about clients that would just be way too pushy about things and then saying this is how you respond to that in a professional way. But I think with COVID and everything that's happening, the response is going to hopefully happen a bit quicker. And I think that that needs to happen from all levels of influence. So this is where I really like to connect everything from my public health theories and everything like that. So from the policy standpoint, you can think about there's this overarching policy and regulation landscape that is basically dictating what happens to these stylists at work because they're licensed and somebody has to make these rules. So if those rules are changed to provide them with a workplace and a work environment that's more supportive and actually prepares them for the realities of the job, that would then impact their mental health because they wouldn't be constantly questioning themselves and their skills. Then you think about that next level down is the workplace itself. So that's where things like what you offer with Oriant would come into play, with providing that more supportive workplace environment, better leadership from management, peer social support in between coworkers. And then you kind of go into that next level down that's like self-care, being aware of your own mental health, getting treatment where you need to, and also helping others get treatment where they might need it.
Very nice. I did a little bit of Google search this morning on this whole idea of going back to work as a salon or a barber shop, and came across a document that Georgia had put out specifically regarding this issue. So it was guidance to the salons in Georgia on what they would want the salon to do to open back up. So I've added that to the GoToMeeting. People can download that, but I thought there was a lot of good suggestions. Obviously, a lot of cleaning, a lot of using, the PPE masks or even a shield, making sure that between various customers. And I think for many, if there is anxiety, and there is for the patrons to go maybe get their hair cut, to see that a barbershop or a salon is taking considerable effort to build a safe environment is good for them, but it's also good for, like you said, the stylist. If I'm going to work, maybe I'm concerned about going back to work. Maybe I need the money, but so I have to go back to work. But it's like, what is my shop doing to protect me, and how am I able to keep myself safe? And there was a lot of things like, everyone that comes in the shop gets a touchless thermometer temperature and is asked, do you have a cough? Are you living with anyone that has symptoms? Are you living with anyone that has been, tested to be positive? Very good ideas and suggestions on how a salon could open back up, or a barbershop.
Yeah.
Any thoughts that you might have around ideas from having worked in the salon of what salons should do to keep their employees and their patrons safe? Any thoughts?
Sure. I think this is where my combination of public health and working in salons is pretty good. So I think that I've seen some really amazing responses to this from salons all over the world and the state and just everywhere. And I think everybody is trying to be really proactive and following CDC guidelines as closely as they can, which is amazing. I think that it's a bit harder for larger salons because you think you have a lot of employees, so you want to bring everybody back to work, but that makes social distancing and that capacity limit a lot harder when you might have 10 to 15 employees already. So that's the 10 people in an enclosed space already. So I think this really brings up this issue of you shouldn't be making decisions for your employees. I think workplace wellness and dealing with mental health in the workplace going forward has so much to do with building a rapport and a trusting relationship between management and your employees. Because if you are essentially forcing all of your employees to come back to work like normal, but then just putting PPE and all these barriers in place, that's not necessarily going to take down everybody's stress levels to an ideal level. So I think that talking with your employees and seeing what they really want to do, are they comfortable coming back to work? Do they have anything else going on in their lives, like issues with childcare where they might not be able to come back to work? Or maybe they only want to come back to work for one appointment a day, and figuring out, can you stagger schedules to benefit your employees a bit more, make them feel more secure, and not just try to immediately shift back to normal with this extra layer of PPE, because obviously while that does create a sort of barrier between person to person, there's still a whole other layer of stress and anxiety and everything beneath that. So I think at this point, everybody is trying to just do the best that they can. And it's really hard to not be like, yes, but you could be doing this so much better.
Yeah.
But so it's very important to acknowledge that, yes, of course, people need to make income right now and everybody is struggling economically, and there's only so much government stimulation that can go around right now. So it's very tough situation, but I think this experience that everybody is going through right now will help in the future to maybe create a strategic plan for, if this happens again, how do we deal with it in an organized manner that actually benefits everybody, if that makes sense.
It does. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about this topic you brought up about the environment that a stylist or a barber, works in, particularly salons where there's a multitude of stylists, and the relationship between management and the stylist. As you've gone around and asked various questions, I'm sure you've seen a variety of cultures. And share with us maybe a little bit more about the comments you've heard from employees and stylists about the stress or the impact that the culture built by the management has on their work environment.
Yeah, I think this was the determinant of stress that I identified in this study that really stood out the most to me, because in my opinion, all of the other determinants can really stem from that, because your management is essentially your leader and they are setting the example for general behavior in the salon, the connection between person to person. There's also some very interesting research that connects family systems to workplace systems. That's very interesting to me. It's a lot more connected to social work, so I'm kind of dabbling in that right now. But just thinking about it as a really influential system, and from talking to these participants about their experiences, it was amazing to hear the extremes. So there were some really, really poor experiences that when I asked, what is the one thing that is stressing you out the most, or if you could pinpoint the source of all of this, a couple people would say management in a bad way, but also in a good way. So for example, let me explain that. Some stylists feel like they're stuck in their jobs and they're not making any money, and they're really, really stressed out and they hate going to work. It's a bad environment for them, but they can't leave because they're stuck in this environment. They have to have this clientele to have this income stability. Even if it's low income, it's still some amount of stability. And they're pressured by their boss to bring in clients. They're pressured to be keeping up with social media. They have all of these responsibilities put on them. And then the flip side of that is you can work in an amazing environment. Your boss can be super supportive and be there for whatever you need, order things that you need at any time, be really flexible, let you have more of a choice in your schedule and what you're doing on a daily basis, put priority on continuing education, be really in tune to changes in the industry or trends that are going around. So it was just really amazing to hear about how your management and your boss can either be the source of stress or almost like the solution to your stress in the workplace.
Nice. And I think that doesn't just apply to a salon. If
No,
you take what
absolutely.
you just got through talking about, that applies to any employee at any work site.
Yeah.
Would you say that the comments you heard as you went around and did your thesis, that you would say, well, this isn't just a stylist issue. This is really any employee and management issue.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
what are some of the things you found in terms of the cultures with those that were positive? What were some of the themes you saw? Let's talk a little bit about creating a culture, especially right now. I think more than ever, as employers are bringing employees back, opening things up, it's incredibly important that employers think about the culture that they've created and the need for maybe an enhanced culture around the risks of the virus and the economic issues. But talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you would say make up for a good culture, practices of management, things maybe you saw as you did your survey thesis. And again, I would encourage those that are on the line to please jump on and let us open up your microphones and let's hear from those that are attending ideas around how do you create a positive culture within a company, in an environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really goes back to just what I was saying about communication. When I was talking to these stylists, so many things that they were talking about and bringing up had to do with building trust and building a solid relationship between you and your management, because you want to be comfortable approaching your management about any issue you have. If it's something that you need to do your job at a more efficient pace or in a healthier way or whatever it is, or if you're having an issue with an employee, you want to be able to go to that management and say, hey, this is making my workday really uncomfortable. Can you do something about this? And know that they are going to be proactive, listen to you, not brush you off, and actually take what you're saying seriously. And I think that is going to be so important moving forward with this reopening plan and just being really transparent with your employees. And I mean, you might not know what the best answer is right now, but you should say that to your employees and be like, hey guys, I am trying my hardest here. Maybe I don't know what's best for everyone. I am following the rules and regulations that have been put on me by the governor or the state regulations, and I'm just doing my best. But there should be a give and take between the employees and the management so that everybody knows that you're working toward a common goal. And something that really stood out to me in these conversations I was having with stylists, one person was so passionate about this difference between leadership and management. And I just thought that it illustrated it so perfectly. So instead of having just your manager on top and it all trickles down to everybody, you want to have somebody who you can just look to and say, hey, this person just completely embodies the environment, the culture, everything that we're working toward, provides a vision for my coworkers and I, and is really motivating and creates this idea of everything we're working toward together, whether that be environmental sustainability. Some salons are super green and really into that, whether it creating this sort of therapeutic experience for clients. Some people are really into like using essential oils and having this kind of sensation and complete experience when you're in the salon. But I think that that's something that really has to be established and talked about so that everybody is on the same page.
Yep. That prompts me to think about the principles of continuous quality improvement. I'm a great fan of Deming, who was one who introduced a lot of these principles many years ago. And I think his concepts of who's the customer, Now, what's going to delight the customer? How are you going to monitor whether the customer is getting what they need and is satisfied and delighted? And then when you find variation in those monitors, how are you going to bring those closer to the process, to the table, to build a team, to create an improvement effort, to measure whether you're making a difference? And I think that applies to not just a salon, but almost any organization. I've always been a fan that you can't just look to the person that you serve. If you're a company that's providing a service, you can't just look to the patrons as the only customer. I believe that the cosmetologist, the employees, the people that are providing the service are just as important a customer and need to be treated in the very same way to monitor their satisfaction, to identify what delights them. How are you, bringing teams closer to the process to improve the effort so that that's done? And I think that's a basic company culture or company philosophy that makes a big difference. And I'll just take a second to tell you a story of probably one of the best examples I've heard of this. And I can't remember if I shared this story with you or not, but I love the book, It's Your Ship. Have you ever heard of the book, It's Your Ship?
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I've heard really great things.
So here's this battleship in the Navy that's got all the technology to be the best performing battleship, and it's at the bottom of the rung. It's performing terribly. And they hire this young admiral, youngest admiral that had ever been, hired in the Navy. He comes on board and he begins to apply basic, simple, continuous quality improvement strategies. He takes some of the ranking out of the ship and he starts meeting with each sailor. And he says, look, nobody is on a battleship for a career. Nobody stays here for their career. So I know and you're not going to be here more than 3 or 4 years. So it's important to me that while you're here, I'm helping you get the experience you need to accomplish your long-term goals for a career. And that created a huge appreciation on the part of the sailors and his staff to say, thanks for thinking of me. And then he would ask, how can we be the best performing battleship? And one day a sailor said, Admiral, have you ever heard of stainless steel? No, he actually asked first, do you know how many times we paint the ship every year? And the Admiral says, yeah, it's about once a month. He said, yeah, we paint this ship. Oh, I spend a lot of my time painting the rust streaks that are created by the weather and by the water. And he says, have you ever heard of stainless steel? And of course, the Admiral says, well, yes. He goes, well, if we would just replace all these bolts and washers throughout the ship with stainless steel, we wouldn't get the rust and we wouldn't need to paint the ship so often. So the Admiral, instead of just saying, well, that's a dumb idea, we don't use that in the Navy, he said, let's start doing that. So over the course of time, he replaced those. And all of a sudden, he didn't have to paint the ship so often. And so he put all that manpower while people were doing this, every month, probably same streaks, he put them to work and became the best performing battleship in the Navy. And now from what I understand, every battleship uses stainless steel nuts, bolts, and washers. That's a great story, an example of how the Admiral looked to the team to fix the system instead of saying, well, I know what we need to do. This is the strategy I've come up with. Let's go implement. So great example of CQA.
That's such a great metaphor. And yeah, while you were talking about that, I was just thinking about it. Another thing that somebody said while I was doing those interviews was that if you are a manager or an owner of a salon, your stylists are your clients as well. So you're not just serving those people that are coming in the door to get their haircut. You're also serving the people that work for you, and they should be able to tell you what they want, just like a client would come in and tell the stylist, this is what I want with my hair. So yeah.
So what are some of the other factors that created emotional challenges while you did your thesis for stylists, whether those were for the patrons or for the stylists, but what are some of the other things that you uncovered in your project, your thesis?
Another really big one was the financial challenges, just not being prepared for the realities of this industry as a fee-for-service business model. And that is really challenging for some people, especially if you're not coming into the industry already financially stable, then you are completely reliant on that haircut coming in and not canceling last minute or not showing up randomly. And that's something that happens a lot in this industry. And there's an issue of accountability from keeping your clients accountable and keeping their appointments. And some people just don't realize that that can directly impact a stylist's financial well-being. So I think, unfortunately, solving that problem is going to take a very long time, a huge industry shift, but there are some opportunities there from the individual standpoint of just teaching basic budgeting skills, how to do taxes well. That's not something that they talked about at all in school, at least in my experience in the school that I went to. There was no mention of how to run your own business, and many stylists end up opening their own salon. There was no training on, starting a business plan, having budgets, doing anything with that extra tip money. So at the end of the day, you're walking out with upwards of $100 in cash. What do you do with that? You go get takeout, or you go out with your friends. And there's just this culture of like social interaction, which is also very great for your mental well-being, but then where'd all your tips go? So there's so many issues with financial challenges, and different business models can benefit stylists in different ways. So there's the commission model, and there's also the booth rent model, where either you are an employee and you get paid commission based on your services, or you basically rent your space and then you keep all the profits. And there are goods and bads to both of those models. It depends on what you like, if you want complete control over your environment, or maybe you want a more team-based environment. So I think that that really comes down to personal preference at a certain point, but at the same time, we didn't get any training on that in school either. We weren't told, hey, this business model might be better for you because of XYZ. Maybe you should go be an employee instead of immediately opening up your own salon. Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple times the lack of certain types of education that would be very helpful to the stylists within their schools and programs that they go through to get certification and licensure. You talked about stress, financial education. You talked about, the emotional relationship with your clients and how you deal with that. How would you go about encouraging schools, and what needs to happen to build a groundswell where those programs do include some additional training and education in very vital areas?
Yeah, sure. So this is a huge pipe dream to me, and I don't know if I could ever see it through, but I can dream. I think having a school system that is basically completely revamped from the ground up needs to happen, because the education system for cosmetology right now is so outdated and does not prepare stylists in any way, shape, or form at all for this job. The services you learn are completely useless. They're not actually haircuts that people want in the salon. You're not really learning anything that's applicable in your day-to-day life as a stylist. So I would love to create or help create something that really the student can choose. So maybe you have different specializations that you can do, just like if you were getting a major in something, or like a bachelor's degree or a minor, or any kind of area where you can say, this is what I want to learn, and I want to learn all of the specialized skills for this thing. I think to a certain degree, a general education is absolutely necessary. So maybe if there was a way to teach everyone the same thing for a certain period of time, but then you had this choice to go down the road of, maybe I really want to do crazy color corrections. If someone completely messes up their hair, I want to learn all of the tiny little things you have to do. Or maybe I have a dream of opening a salon. I want to go down the business and leadership management track. Or what else? Men's cuts. We get like no training on how to do men's cuts well. Maybe I really want to specialize in short hair. Okay, I'm going to go down that route. So just providing something that's more relevant, but also something where the student has more of a choice in what they want to learn about, I think would be just incredible. And also just trying to elevate the industry and the school itself as a valid thing to do with your life. There's a huge issue with attitude of going to hair school. And even when I was in hair school, I would have clients come in and they'd say, so are you in college right now? And I'd say, no, I'm at hair school. This is where I am. This is what I'm doing. And there's just, I'm sure no one means it in a negative way, and they mean well, but I think there's just a little bit of ignorance with the reality of it's a valid trade and it's a really good career that you can build just into whatever you want, basically. So I think, yeah, I don't even know how we could get there, but I would love to see something like that happen someday.
Well, big things happen when people jump in and make it their passion, and you certainly have the passion to make that happen. So we call them big audacious goals.
Yep.
Set
I
those
have a lot.
goals, and you can't eat the elephant all in one bite, but set the stage and you can accomplish that. So we need to be wrapping up fairly soon. So I want to give you a chance to take the last 2 or 3 minutes to share any other thought that you think is applicable to the topic today that we haven't had a chance to talk about in closing.
Okay. Sure. I think I'm not entirely sure who is on this call and who's listening, if you are a stylist or if you're not a stylist, but I think just the interest that you're showing in listening to this and watching it really is huge to me. And it means so much to know that people outside the industry are starting to open their eyes to this. And it really, like, this is just what I dreamed of happening. So it's just so amazing to see the acknowledgement and just everything that people are realizing about the industry and stylists in general. I think we have a long way to go, and I think that I'm not trying to take credit at all for starting a movement, but I would absolutely love to be a part of it and to just increase the understanding that people have of this industry and that people love what they do. Stylists are really, really passionate about doing hair, and that's so important. And I think that's something that should really be encouraged, and hopefully I can do something about that.
Nice. Thank you so much. So in conclusion, I'd like to introduce or invite people to join us on Friday, May 22nd. Our guest panelist will be Dr. Danny McLean. He's the owner of ADIO Chiropractic Clinic in the Chicago area. Dr. McLean will be sharing thoughts about how to live in harmony with the way your brain is designed to work. Everyone will be receiving a post-huddle survey. We would encourage you to complete that so we get feedback. If you've got ideas or topics or themes for future huddles, we'd love to hear those. Or if you have someone that you would recommend or you would like to be a guest panelist, please share that with us. You can reach us. You can contact us through the Contact Us form on goingonoffense.com. We want to thank today's panelist. Dakota, you've been awesome. Thank you very much for participating with us today. We also want to thank organizations that have gotten behind this movement. There are some wonderful offers, resources, helps, ideas, and suggestions on our website, Going on Offense. Please take advantage of those. We'd like to remind you that we're recording a huddle and we'll be posting that later today, as we have the past huddles. I think we're like on our 21st or 22nd huddle now, and we've covered many different themes. We would encourage you to take advantage of checking those out. We're going to close today by sharing a video that one of my staff found that I thought was fantastic. You'll enjoy the advice from a young person, a very young person. We'll sign off now. Thanks again, Dakota, and I will start up that video.
Okay, thank you so much, Daryl.